And we'll talk about a big meeting tomorrow for Andy Burnham. Actually, it is a big meeting for Andy Burnham. So it's a simple meeting, but a significant meeting. He's going to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy for the first time as Prime Minister. Earlier, I spoke to Cormac Smith, a former special advisor for Ukraine's Foreign Minister. Began by asking him what reception he thinks the Ukrainian President will have from the new Prime Minister.
I was going to say I don't know. Actually, I expect it to be very warm. I am delighted to see that it's happening. You know, I've been, with my Irish accent, I've been a very, very proud Irish Brit for the last 4.5 years that Britain has been to the forefront of supporting Ukraine. And that has continued unchanged through a number of different prime ministers. So I must say that I'm very, very encouraged that the two are meeting and that President Zelenskyy is coming to number 10 tomorrow. Andy Burnham, to a large extent, an unknown quantity, but I am optimistic at the moment.
And he, I don't think there's any doubt that he supports Ukraine. He's signalled his support for Ukraine. You can expect continuity as far as the UK's position is concerned. Do we need more than that? I mean, is there an argument that Andy Burnham needs somehow to go further here?
It's great that the West supports Ukraine, and it's great that we have seen, especially with the arrival of Donald Trump for the second time and withdrawing support, that we have seen Europe stand up and Britain to be the forefront of that. I will always say, and I always have said, we could do more. We could give them more faster. And in the past, we gave them a lot of support with handcuffs on. That is changing. I guess my concern is around the Strategic Defence Review and Britain's commitment to raise defence spending to 3% of GDP by 2030. Now, we know that it was the apparent failure to do that caused John Healey to resign. So again, I'm very, very encouraged that John Healey has been put into number 11. West Streeting, I have got to say, has raised a few eyebrows among military friends of mine and other people in the know, because he is a completely unknown element when it comes to defence. But I think for the moment, we've got to stand back and we've got to give him a chance. I am concerned both that, one of the ways that Britain has provided such great support for Ukraine over the last 4.5 years has been by massively running down our own armaments and munition stores. And they, to what I'm being told, simply haven't been replaced. And, we've got to remind ourselves, when it comes to the league table of spending in NATO in terms of percentage of GDP, Britain is now in last place. The only country that's behind us is Iceland, and they don't have an army. I would suggest this is some fall from grace. So I am really hoping and expecting that Andy Burnham with his Chancellor John Healey are going to seriously address this. But he has a huge, huge challenge. He inherits initially a £5 billion a year black hole. We know the country is spending 350, if I've got my figure right, £1 billion a year on welfare. And Lord Robertson said, who is the author of the Strategic Defence Review, and a former head of NATO, said that we simply can't afford to have that sort of a welfare bill while not defending ourselves. At the moment, he seems to be telling people what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. So I guess I remain to be convinced, and there are a few worrying elements there for me. Okay. But on the substantive case that Britain seems to be foursquare behind Ukraine, I absolutely welcome that. And to go back to your very first question, I expect these two will get on very well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just briefly, Cormac. Volodymyr Zelenskyy comes into this meeting after a difficult couple of weeks. There have been, sackings and protests at home. There is still a lot of support for him as Ukraine's president, but he isn't on the steadiest of ground at the moment. Will that be present? Does that matter? Does that play into the sort of dynamic between Zelenskyy and other world leaders?
Look, some of the stuff that's happened in Kyiv over the last 2 weeks has been unfortunate. Sources have told me that people in Brussels are not best pleased. And, this matters for Ukraine's EU accession talks and process. So, things have been a bit clumsy in the last in the last few weeks. He has now sacked Syrskyi as head of the army and appointed a young guy called Rapati. And everybody I speak to, this guy seems to be a universally popular decision. When it comes to the sacking of his defense minister, there's an awful lot less clarity. And I'm afraid I don't have a direct line inside Bankova, which is the presidential administration in Kyiv. So I don't know. So I've got to be honest, he comes at a weakened time. But look, the man must be exhausted. He's been a pretty fabulous wartime leader for 4.5 years. I don't think you or I or almost anybody on this island can imagine the sort of stress he must be under, when basically Russia wants to take over all of Ukraine and erase Ukraine and Ukrainian national identity from the face of the map. And they have said, and they have already proven in 4.5 years, that to do that, if they're given the chance, they will quite happily murder tens of thousands of those Ukrainians who would still oppose them. So I think we need to give Zelenskyy a break. But it's been less than ideal what's happened in Kyiv over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
That's Cormac Smith, former advisor to Ukraine's foreign minister. Full coverage of that tomorrow on Times Radio as it happens. Big moment for Andy Burnham.